Newark, New Jersey, October 2009. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of the small apartment on Ferry Street as Marianne Hoffman stared at the clock above the kitchen sink. 7:47 p.m., 3 hours and 47 minutes late. She pressed redial for the 23rd time that evening, her thumb trembling against the screen of her flip phone. The call went straight to voicemail again, Derek's voice casual and confident asking her to leave a message. She didn't bother anymore. Her previous messages had progressed from concerned to frantic to desperate. "Come on, Emma," she whispered to the empty apartment as if her 6-year-old daughter could somehow hear her across the distance. "Where are you, baby?" The custody agreement was crystal clear. Derek would pick up Emma every other Friday at 5 p.m. and return her Sunday evening by 6 p.m. He'd been late before, 20 minutes here, an hour there, always with excuses about traffic or forgetting the time. But never 3 hours, never radio silence. Marianne walked to Emma's room for the 4th time in an hour, standing in the doorway and staring at the carefully made bed with its purple butterfly comforter. The stuffed rabbit Emma slept with every night sat propped against the pillow, its worn fabric ears flopping to one side. Emma had been devastated to forget it Friday morning, crying as Derek's car pulled away from the curb. "She'll be okay for one weekend without Mr. Hoppy," Derek had said through the rolled-down window, impatient to leave. "Stop babying her, Marianne." That had been 57 hours ago. Marianne returned to the kitchen and picked up the landline, dialing Derek's mother's number in Trenton. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. She'd already left 2 messages there earlier in the day. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, ending 3 years of marriage that had started to crumble almost from the beginning. Derek's drinking, his inability to hold down a job, the way he'd disappear for days without explanation, it had all become too much once Emma was born. Marianne had fought hard for primary custody, and Derek had contested it bitterly, showing up to court sober and well-dressed, playing the role of the reformed father. The judge had granted Marianne primary custody but given Derek visitation rights. "A child needs both parents," the judge had said, looking at Derek with something like sympathy. But what if one of those parents couldn't be trusted? Marianne had documented everything since the divorce, every late pickup, every missed call, every time Derek returned Emma wearing dirty clothes or smelling like cigarette smoke. She had a 3-inch binder full of notes, just in case she needed to go back to court. But she'd never imagined needing documentation for something like this. At 8:15 p.m. she called the Newark Police Department. The dispatcher sounded bored. "Is this a custody dispute, ma'am?" "No," Marianne said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My daughter was supposed to be returned 3 hours ago. Her father isn't answering his phone. I don't know where she is." "Do you have a custody agreement?" "Yes, legal, through the court." "And the father has visitation rights?" "Yes, but..." "Then this is technically a civil matter, ma'am. If he doesn't return her by tomorrow, you can file a complaint with family court." Marianne's hand tightened around the phone. "You don't understand. This isn't like him. Something's wrong. He won't answer any calls. I need someone to check on them." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Do you have an address where they might be?" Marianne rattled off Derek's last known address, a studio apartment in East Orange that he'd moved into after the divorce. She also gave his mother's address, his sister's place in Jersey City, and the auto body shop where he'd worked briefly last spring. "I'll send an officer to do a welfare check," the dispatcher said finally. "But I'm telling you now, if this is just a custody dispute, there's not much we can do tonight." "Thank you," Marianne breathed. "Thank you so much." She waited by the phone. 9 o'clock came and went. Then 10. At 10:42 p.m., her phone finally rang. "Ms. Hoffman, this is Officer Patricia Chen with Newark PD. I went to the address you provided on South Clinton Street. The landlord says Derek Hoffman moved out 6 weeks ago. Left no forwarding address. I also checked the other locations you mentioned. His mother's house appears empty and the sister says she hasn't seen him in months." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Marianne's feet. 6 weeks? That can't be right. He picked up Emma on Friday, 2 days ago. Does he have a vehicle? A blue Honda Civic, 2004, I think. I don't know the license plate number. More typing sounds. I'm going to file a report and pass this to our juvenile division. They'll follow up first thing Monday morning. In the meantime, do you have recent photos of your daughter? Yes, dozens. Bring them to the station tomorrow, along with your custody papers and any other documentation. Ask for Detective Mike Reeves. He handles these cases. After Officer Chen hung up, Marianne stood in her kitchen, the overhead light buzzing faintly, and tried to process what was happening. Derek had moved 6 weeks ago, and he hadn't told her, hadn't updated his address with the court, had continued to exercise his visitation rights, picking Emma up from this apartment from Marianne's life without ever mentioning that he'd relocated. Why? The question pulsed through her mind as she walked through the apartment, checking locks, peering out windows at the rain-slicked street below. The neighborhood was quiet, just the occasional car passing, headlights cutting through the darkness. She tried to think logically. Derek was impulsive, disorganized, often irresponsible, but he loved Emma, didn't he? In his own flawed way. He wouldn't hurt her. He wouldn't take her somewhere dangerous. But then, what was he doing? At midnight, Marianne gave up on sleep. She sat at her small dining table with her laptop, searching for any trace of Derek online. His Facebook page hadn't been updated since July, a photo of him standing in front of the auto body shop, grease-stained and grinning. His phone number was disconnected when she tried it again. His email bounced back undeliverable. It was as if he'd begun erasing himself months ago, and she'd been too focused on the daily routines of single motherhood to notice. She pulled up Emma's school photo from last spring, her daughter's face round and freckled, front teeth missing, brown hair pulled back in pigtails. Emma had been so excited about losing those teeth, putting them under her pillow for the tooth fairy, saving the dollar bills in a plastic sandwich bag. "Where are you, sweetheart?" Marianne whispered to the photo. The hours crawled past. At 6 a.m., Marianne showered and dressed, moving mechanically. She gathered every photo she had of Emma, school pictures, birthday parties, beach trips, everyday snapshots. She assembled her custody papers, Derek's last known contact information, and her 3-inch documentation binder. At exactly 8 a.m., she was waiting outside the Newark Police Department's Juvenile Division when Detective Mike Reeves arrived. A stocky man in his late 40s with gray-flecked hair and tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too many of these cases. "Ms. Hoffman," he shook her hand and gestured toward the building. "Let's talk inside." His office was cramped and cluttered, files stacked on every surface. He cleared a chair for her and sat behind his desk, pulling out a fresh notepad. "Tell me everything," he said. "Start from the beginning." Marianne did, her voice surprisingly steady. She explained the divorce, the custody arrangement, Derek's pattern of irresponsibility. She showed him her documentation binder, the timeline of concerns she'd been building. She described Friday's pickup, Emma's forgotten stuffed rabbit, the way Derek had seemed in a hurry to leave. Detective Reeves took notes, occasionally asking questions. When she finished, he sat back in his chair. "Here's what we're looking at," he said. "Legally, Derek has visitation rights. He's entitled to have Emma during his designated times. The fact that he moved without notifying you or the court is a problem, but it's a civil matter, something you'd need to address through family court." "But he won't answer his phone," Marianne interrupted. "He's disappeared with my daughter." "I understand your concern, Ms. Hoffman. I really do. But right now, we don't have evidence of a crime. It's been less than 72 hours. He could be anywhere, visiting relatives, taking a trip. Parents do this sometimes without thinking it through." "This isn't that," Marianne insisted. "Derek doesn't take Emma on trips. He can barely manage a weekend at his apartment." Detective Reeves nodded slowly. "I'm going to open an investigation. We'll try to locate Derek's vehicle, check with family members, see if he's used any credit cards recently. But I need to be honest with you. These parental dispute cases are complicated. If Derek surfaces in a few days with Emma and says he just needed more time, There's not much we can do legally unless you go back to court to modify the custody arrangement. And if he doesn't surface? The detective's expression sobered. Then we escalate, but let's take this one step at a time. Over the next week, Marianne called Detective Reeves every morning. The investigation was moving, he assured her, but slowly. Derek's vehicle hadn't been spotted. His bank account showed no activity since Friday afternoon, a withdrawal of $300 from an ATM in Newark, right before he'd picked up Emma. His cell phone remained off. Family members claimed they hadn't heard from him, though the detective suspected Derek's mother might be lying. Some parents in these situations close ranks, Reeves explained. They see it as a family matter, not a police matter. Marianne went through the motions of her life, going to work at the medical billing office, coming home to her too-quiet apartment, lying awake at night imagining worst-case scenarios. Her co-workers whispered when she walked past. Her boss, Mrs. Patterson, pulled her aside on day 9. "Take some time off," she said gently. "Personal leave, whatever you need." But staying home was worse. At least at work, Marianne could lose herself in numbers and claim forms and the steady rhythm of data entry. At home, there was only Emma's empty room and the terrible silence. On day 12, Detective Reeves called with an update. "We found Derek's vehicle," he said, "abandoned in long-term parking at Newark Liberty Airport. It's been there since October 17th, the day after he picked up Emma." Marianne's breath caught. "The airport, where did they go?" "That's what we're trying to determine. We're checking passenger manifests, but it's complicated. If he used cash and false names." "Ms. Hoffman, I have to ask you something difficult. Did Derek have a passport for Emma?" "No," Marianne said immediately. Then she hesitated. "At least I don't think so. I have her birth certificate. I never applied for a passport for her." "Could Derek have gotten one? Would he need my permission?" "Not necessarily. If he had her birth certificate and went to a passport office with Emma, claiming to be the sole guardian, it's possible." The implications settled over Marianne like ice water. "You think he took her out of the country?" "I think it's a possibility we need to consider," Detective Reeves said carefully. "I'm going to contact Homeland Security and get them involved. This changes things, Ms. Hoffman. If Derek crossed international borders with Emma, this becomes a federal case. Parental kidnapping across state or national lines is a serious crime." But as the weeks turned into months, the trail went cold. No one could confirm that Derek and Emma had boarded any international flights. His passport had been used to board a flight to Mexico City on October 17th, but there was no record of a child traveling with him. Mexican authorities were contacted but couldn't locate him in their systems. He could have entered Mexico and then gone anywhere in Central or South America, Detective Reeves told Marianne in late November. "Once you're out of the U.S., it's much harder to track." The case was transferred to multiple agencies: the FBI, Interpol, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Emma's photo was distributed. Marianne did everything she was supposed to do, maintained the missing persons website, gave interviews to local news stations, plastered the neighborhood with flyers. But as Christmas approached and 2009 turned into 2010, the calls from Detective Reeves became less frequent. The investigation stalled. Derek had vanished, and he'd taken Emma with him into a void that swallowed them both completely. By the spring of 2010, when Marianne attended what would be Emma's 7th birthday party, held at the apartment with just Marianne's sister and mother, celebrating a ghost, Detective Reeves called with the news she'd been dreading. "We're classifying this as an inactive case," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "That doesn't mean we're giving up. If any new leads come in, we'll pursue them. But right now, we've exhausted every avenue we have. I'm sorry, Ms. Hoffman, I really am." Marianne set the phone down and walked to Emma's room, where Mr. Hoppy still sat propped against the pillow, waiting for a little girl who never came home. The case file was archived in Newark's Juvenile Division office, boxed away with thousands of other unresolved matters: custody disputes, runaways, cold leads that led nowhere. And for nearly 10 years, that's where it stayed. Portland, Oregon, March 2019. Marianne's hands shook as she held her phone, frozen on the image she'd paused. The video had been playing in the background of a local news segment about an academic achievement ceremony at Lincoln High School in Portland. A fluff piece about honor roll students that she'd only half watched while eating her lunch at her desk. But then she'd seen the face. A girl in the crowd, maybe 16 or 17 years old, standing near the back of the auditorium, dark brown hair pulled into a ponytail, a sprinkling of freckles across her nose, holding a certificate and smiling shyly at someone off camera. The resemblance hit Marianne like a physical blow, making her gasp so loudly that her coworker Jennifer looked over with concern. "You okay?" Marianne couldn't answer. She rewound the video, watched it again, paused on the girl's face. Her heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. It couldn't be. After nearly 10 years, it couldn't possibly be. But the shape of the eyes was identical. The slight gap between the front teeth, though these were adult teeth now, not the missing baby teeth from Emma's last school photo. The way the girl tilted her head when she smiled, just a fraction to the left. Even the freckles seemed to match the pattern Marianne had memorized from 1,000 bedtime kisses. Marianne had moved to Portland 3 years ago, in 2016, after her mother died. There was nothing left for her in Newark, just painful memories and pitying looks from neighbors who'd watched her transform from a young divorced mother into something haunted and desperate. The job offer from Pacific Northwest Medical Associates had been a lifeline, a chance to start over in a place where no one knew her story. She'd continued searching, of course. Every age-progressed photo the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released, she studied obsessively. Every unidentified child case that appeared in the news, she investigated. She'd become an expert in facial recognition, in the subtle ways a child's features changed as they grew. She could spot similarities that others missed, though they usually led nowhere, just cruel coincidences, other people's daughters who happened to look vaguely like the ghost she carried. But this was different. This wasn't vague. This wasn't maybe. This was Emma. Marianne's hands trembled as she pulled up the video again, this time on her computer. She took screenshots, zooming in on the girl's face. Lincoln High School, the caption had said. Portland, Oregon. Honor roll ceremony, March 2019. She opened her desk drawer where she kept the folder, the one she'd carried through every move, every sleepless night, every therapy session her insurance would cover. Inside were copies of Emma's photos, the age progression images, newspaper clippings about the case from 2009 and 2010. She pulled out the most recent age progression photo, created last year when Emma would have turned 16. The similarities were undeniable. The computer-generated prediction and the girl in the video could have been sisters. Same facial structure, same eyes, same subtle asymmetry in the smile. "Jennifer," Marianne called across the office partition, her voice cracking. "Can you come here? I need you to look at something." Jennifer Martinez had become Marianne's closest friend in Portland, one of the few people she'd confided in about Emma. They'd bonded during late-night inventory sessions, and Marianne had gradually shared her story, always careful not to be the tragic figure who couldn't move on, but unable to completely hide the hole at her center. Jennifer hurried over, reading the urgency in Marianne's tone. "What's wrong?" Marianne turned her computer screen, showing the paused video frame next to Emma's age progression photo. "Look at this girl, what do you see?" Jennifer leaned in, studying both images. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, Marianne, that's when... They look exactly alike." "I'm not crazy, you see it too?" "Absolutely. Where is this from?" "Local news this morning. Lincoln High School here in Portland." Jennifer pulled up a chair, her expression shifting from shock to determination. "Okay, what do we do? Do we call the police?" Marianne's mind raced. She'd been down this road before. The false leads, the hopeful moments that collapsed into disappointment. In 2012, someone had reported seeing Emma at a shopping mall in Sacramento. Marianne had driven 7 hours overnight, only to discover it was a different child entirely. In 2014, a facial recognition match on social media had sent her to Chicago, where a confused teenager and her angry parents had threatened to call the police on Marianne for harassment. Each false alarm had carved away another piece of her credibility with the authorities. By 2015, when she'd reported a possible sighting in Miami. Detective Reeves had been kind but firm. "Ms. Hoffman, I understand you want to find your daughter. We all do. But you can't chase every child who looks vaguely similar. It's not healthy for you and it could cause problems for innocent families." But this wasn't vague similarity. This was different. "I need to be sure before I contact the police," Marianne said, her voice steadier now. "If I call Newark and tell them I found Emma after 10 years based on a 2-second video clip, they'll think I've finally lost it completely." Jennifer nodded slowly. "So what's the plan?" "Lincoln High School. I need to find out who this girl is. Her name, her family, where she lives. Once I have concrete information, then I go to the police." "How do we do that without... you can't just walk into a high school and ask for student information." Marianne was already pulling up the school's website. "The honor roll ceremony was yesterday. They'll probably post photos from the event. If I can get a clearer image, maybe identify her in a caption." For the next hour, Marianne and Jennifer scoured the internet. Lincoln High School's website, their Facebook page, Instagram accounts tagged with the school's location, parent groups, local news outlets, anything that might have covered yesterday's ceremony. At 2:47 p.m., Jennifer found it, a photo gallery on the school's website, uploaded that morning. Academic Excellence Awards Ceremony 2019. 43 photos of students receiving certificates, shaking hands with administrators, posing with proud parents. And there, in photo number 31, was the girl. The caption read, "Sophomore Sarah Mitchell receives recognition for maintaining a 4.0 GPA throughout the academic year." Sarah Mitchell. The name meant nothing to Marianne, but the face, Emma's face aged 10 years, meant everything. "Now what?" Jennifer asked quietly. Marianne stared at the screen, her mind calculating possibilities. "I need more information. Where does Sarah Mitchell live? Who are her parents? When did she enroll at Lincoln High School?" "That's not public information. The school won't just give that to you." "No," Marianne agreed. "But there are other ways." She spent the evening at home, her laptop open on the coffee table, conducting the kind of research that existed in the gray area between determination and obsession. Public records databases, social media deep dives, address history searches that cost $19.95 per report. By midnight, she had a file, Sarah Marie Mitchell. Date of birth listed as April 15, 2003, which would make her 16 years old, the same age Emma would be. She lived at 847 Maple Grove Avenue in the Laurelhurst neighborhood with Robert Mitchell, age 51, and Catherine Mitchell, age 48. No other children listed at the address. According to county records, the Mitchells had purchased the house in July 2010, less than a year after Emma disappeared. Robert was a financial consultant. Catherine worked part-time as a library assistant. They appeared to live a quiet middle-class life in a quiet middle-class neighborhood. Sarah's social media presence was minimal. A private Instagram account with only 47 followers. A Facebook profile with privacy settings locked down tight. What little Marianne could see showed a normal teenage life. School events, coffee dates with friends, a photo from last summer at the Oregon coast. But here's what bothered Marianne. Sarah Mitchell didn't appear in any school records before September 2010. No elementary school enrollment, no kindergarten registration, no preschool records in the Portland area. She'd simply appeared in the Lincoln High School feeder system as a 5th grader in fall 2010, with a transfer notation from homeschool. Marianne cross-referenced Sarah's birth date with public birth records. There was a Sarah Marie Mitchell born in Oregon in April 2003, but in Eugene, not Portland. The parents listed on that birth certificate were Michael and Jennifer Mitchell, not Robert and Catherine. The pieces didn't fit. Or rather, they fit too perfectly into a pattern Marianne had studied for years. False documentation, manufactured histories, children whose paper trails started suspiciously late in life. At 1:30 a.m., she made the call. The Newark Police Department's night dispatch put her through to the Juvenile Division's voicemail. She left a message, trying to sound calm and rational despite the exhaustion and adrenaline coursing through her system. "This is Marianne Hoffman. I'm calling about case number J2009-4782, the disappearance of Emma Hoffman in October 2009. I believe I've located my daughter. She's living in Portland, Oregon under the name Sarah Mitchell. I have photos, address information, and documentation showing inconsistencies in her background. Please contact me as soon as possible." She left her cell number and hung up, then sat in the darkness of her living room, staring at the photos spread across her coffee table. Emma at 6 years old, frozen in time, and Sarah at 16, caught in a video frame, possibly the same person separated by a decade of absence. Detective Reeves called back at 6:45 a.m. Portland time, 9:45 in Newark, early enough that he must have come in specifically to respond to her message. "Ms. Hoffman," he said, and she could hear the caution in his voice. "I got your message. Before we go any further, I need to ask you some questions." "I know what you're thinking," Marianne said quickly. "You think this is like Sacramento or Chicago or Miami, but it's not. I have photos. The resemblance is exact. And the timeline matches. This girl appeared in Portland public schools right after Emma disappeared, with a background that doesn't check out." "Walk me through it," Reeves said. "Slowly. Everything you found." Marianne did, presenting her research methodically. She emailed him the screenshots, the age progression comparison, the documentation of Sarah Mitchell's suspicious timeline. She could hear him typing as she talked, pulling up files, cross-referencing information. When she finished, there was a long silence. "Ms. Hoffman," Reeves said finally, "I'm not going to lie to you. This is more substantial than the previous leads you've called in. The timeline is concerning. The physical resemblance in these photos is remarkable. But I need you to understand something. Approaching this the wrong way could be disastrous. If this is Emma, and there's illegal adoption or false documentation involved, we need to build a case carefully. If it's not Emma, and you confront this family directly, you could face harassment charges." "So what do I do?" Marianne's voice broke slightly. "Just sit here and do nothing?" "No. You did the right thing calling me. Here's what happens next. I'm going to contact the Portland Police Department and request their assistance in investigating this. They'll need to verify the information you've provided, interview the family if appropriate, and potentially request a DNA comparison. But this takes time, Ms. Hoffman, legal time. We can't just knock on the door and demand a cheek swab." "How long?" "Weeks, maybe. We need warrants. We need coordination between departments. We need to involve the FBI since this crosses state lines. And we need to be prepared for the possibility that the Mitchells have legitimate documentation, even if it looks suspicious to us." Marianne closed her eyes, fighting the urge to scream. 10 years. She'd waited 10 years. And now that she'd found Emma, because she knew, deep in her bones, that Sarah Mitchell was Emma, she had to wait longer. "Please," she whispered. "Please move as fast as you can. That's my daughter. I know it's her. I believe that you believe that," Reeves said gently. "And I promise you, we'll investigate thoroughly. Just don't do anything on your own. Don't contact the family. Don't go to their house. Don't approach the girl at school. Let us handle this properly. Can you do that?" Marianne thought about Emma's room in Newark, preserved exactly as it had been in October 2009 until Marianne finally, painfully packed it away before moving to Portland. She thought about Mr. Hoppy, still in a box in her closet waiting. She thought about 10 years of birthdays and Christmases and first days of school she'd missed. "Yes," she lied, "I'll wait." But as she hung up the phone and looked at the photo of Sarah Mitchell on her screen, at Emma's eyes staring back at her across a decade of silence, Marianne knew she wouldn't wait long. She couldn't. Not when her daughter was less than 5 miles away, living someone else's life, possibly not even knowing who she really was. The morning sun rose over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Marianne Hoffman began making plans. Portland, Oregon, March 2019. Marianne sat in her Honda Accord across the street from 847 Maple Grove Avenue for 3 days before she saw her daughter's face in person. She'd taken sick leave from work, easy enough with Jennifer covering for her, telling their supervisor that Marianne had come down with a severe flu. Each morning at 6:30 a.m., Marianne parked 2 houses down from the Mitchell residence, a coffee thermos beside her, and a camera with a telephoto lens in her lap. She watched the house wake up, lights turning on in sequence, starting with the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, then the kitchen downstairs, finally a corner room on the 2nd floor that Marianne guessed was Sarah's. The neighborhood was exactly what the real estate listings would call family-friendly. Established trees lined the sidewalks, their branches just beginning to bud with spring growth. Houses were well-maintained, a mix of craftsman and colonial styles with neat lawns and tidy flower beds. A few joggers passed in the early morning. A woman walked her golden retriever. Everything perfectly normal, perfectly safe. The kind of place where no one would think to look for a kidnapped child. On the first morning, Marianne watched Robert Mitchell leave for work at 7:45 a.m., climbing into a silver Lexus sedan and driving off toward downtown. Catherine emerged 20 minutes later, wearing a cardigan and carrying a canvas tote bag, heading in the opposite direction, toward the library branch where she worked, Marianne assumed. But Sarah didn't appear. Marianne waited until 9 a.m., well past when school would have started, before realizing it must be spring break. The Portland School District website confirmed it when she checked on her phone. Students were off all week. She returned the next day anyway, unable to stay away. This time she saw Catherine leave at 8 a.m. and return an hour later with grocery bags. Still no sign of Sarah. Marianne wondered if the girl was even home, or if she was away somewhere. Spring break trip, staying with friends, anything that would explain her absence. On the 3rd morning, Marianne's persistence was rewarded. At 9:17 a.m., the front door opened and a teenage girl stepped out onto the porch wearing running shoes, black leggings, and a Lincoln High School track team sweatshirt. She did a few stretches on the front steps, earbuds in, her ponytail swinging as she bent to touch her toes. Marianne's breath stopped completely. Even from 50 yards away, even with 10 years of separation, she knew. The way the girl moved, the angle of her shoulders, the unconscious gesture of tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear before starting down the porch steps. It was Emma. Not a resemblance. Not a maybe. Her daughter, undeniably, impossibly alive and standing in the morning sunlight. Marianne's hand moved to the car door handle, every instinct screaming to run across the street, to grab Emma and hold her and never let go. But Reeves's warning echoed in her mind. Don't approach the family. Let us handle this properly. She forced herself to stay in the car, watching as Sarah, Emma, began jogging down the sidewalk in the opposite direction, heading toward what looked like a park entrance at the end of the block. Marianne waited 30 seconds, then started her car and followed at a distance. The park was larger than it appeared from the street, 40 acres of wooded trails, open fields, and a small lake. Marianne parked in the lot and watched Sarah disappear down a running trail that curved through a grove of Douglas firs. She sat for 5 minutes, her mind racing with possibilities. She could wait here until Sarah finished her run. She could approach her then, away from the house, away from the Mitchells. She could show her the photos, tell her the truth, ask her if she remembered anything from before. But what if Sarah didn't remember? She'd been 6 years old when Derek took her. How much could a 6-year-old retain after 10 years of living a completely different life? What if the name Emma Hoffman meant nothing to her? What if she looked at Marianne with complete stranger's eyes and called for help? Worse, what if Sarah did remember and the memories were traumatic? What if Derek had told her that Marianne was dangerous, that she'd hurt her, that Sarah had been rescued from an abusive home? Kidnapping parents did that sometimes, rewriting history to justify their actions. Marianne's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Reeves. Portland PD has assigned detective to case, Julia Santos. She'll contact you today. Do not approach the family. Investigation in progress. She stared at the message, then at the trail where her daughter had vanished into the trees. Every maternal instinct demanded that she go, that she find Emma and bring her home. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had learned painful lessons from a decade of false leads and legal dead ends, knew that Reeves was right. If she approached Sarah now, without proper legal framework, without proof, without protection, she could lose her forever. The Mitchells could claim harassment. They could move. They could disappear just like Derek had, and this time Marianne might never find the trail again. She started her car and drove away before she could change her mind. At 2:37 p.m., Detective Julia Santos called. "Ms. Hoffman, this is Detective Santos with Portland PD. Detective Reeves from Newark brought me up to speed on your daughter's case. I've reviewed the information you provided about Sarah Mitchell. I'd like to meet with you this afternoon if possible. Can you come to the Central Precinct?" They met in an interview room that smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Detective Santos was younger than Marianne expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a bun and intelligent eyes that assessed Marianne carefully as they shook hands. "I want to start by saying I understand how difficult this situation is," Santos began, sitting across the table from Marianne. "I've read the case file from Newark. What happened to your daughter in 2009 was every parent's nightmare, and I can't imagine what these past 10 years have been like for you." "Have you seen her?" Marianne asked, unable to contain the question. "Have you seen Sarah Mitchell in person?" "Not yet. That's part of what we need to discuss. Before we can approach the family or the minor in question, we need to establish probable cause. Right now, we have a physical resemblance and a suspicious timeline. That's enough to open an investigation, but not enough for a court order requiring DNA testing." Marianne pulled out her folder, the one she'd been refining for 3 days. "Sarah Mitchell's birth certificate lists parents who don't match the people raising her. She has no school records before 2010. She appeared in Portland 6 months after my daughter disappeared. The age is exact. The physical resemblance is undeniable." Santos examined the documents Marianne spread across the table. "The birth certificate inconsistency is significant. How did you obtain this information?" "Public records searches. Anyone can access them." "And the school records?" "I made some calls, posed as someone doing genealogy research." Santos's expression remained neutral, but Marianne saw the flicker of concern. "Ms. Hoffman, I need you to understand something. Any evidence obtained through deception or impersonation could be challenged in court. If this case goes to trial, and it likely will, we need everything to be completely above board. So what you're saying is, even though I found her, even though I know that's my daughter living 5 miles from here, I have to wait while you do everything I already did, but with proper paperwork?" "Yes," Santos said simply. "That's exactly what I'm saying. I know it's frustrating, but consider the alternative. Let's say you approached Sarah directly yesterday morning when she went for her run. Let's say you convinced her to take a DNA test. The Mitchells could argue that you coerced their minor daughter without parental consent. Any results would be inadmissible. They could get a restraining order against you. They could move and change their names, and we'd lose her again." The logic was unassailable, and Marianne hated it. "How long will this take?" she asked quietly. "I'm filing for a warrant today to obtain Sarah Mitchell's school records officially. I'm also requesting a background check on Robert and Catherine Mitchell, employment history, financial records, any criminal history. If we find evidence of false documentation or suspicious activity around the time of your daughter's disappearance, we can use that to justify a DNA test. And if you don't find anything?" Santos hesitated. "Then we'll need to build a stronger case before we can compel the family to cooperate. But Ms. Hoffman, I want you to know, I believe you. I've looked at these photos. I've read the case file. The probability that this is a coincidence is extremely low. We will find out the truth. It just has to be done correctly." Marianne left the police station as the sun was setting, painting the Portland sky in bruised purples and oranges. She drove past Maple Grove Avenue on her way home. She couldn't help herself, and saw lights on in the Mitchell house. Through the large front window, she caught a glimpse of movement. Someone setting the table for dinner, a normal family, going through normal evening routines. Except nothing about this family was normal. For the next week, Marianne tried to maintain some semblance of her regular life. She returned to work, though she could barely focus on the medical billing codes that had once seemed so important. Jennifer brought her lunch every day, sat with her in the break room, and listened to her obsessive recounting of every detail she'd observed about Sarah Mitchell. "What if she doesn't remember me?" Marianne asked on the fourth day, pushing her sandwich around her plate untouched. "What if I'm just a stranger to her now?" "Then you help her remember," Jennifer said firmly. "You have 10 years of love to give her, Marianne. That doesn't disappear just because she doesn't remember the first 6 years." Detective Santos called twice during that week with updates. The warrant for Sarah Mitchell's school records had been approved. The records showed that Sarah had been enrolled in September 2010 with a birth certificate, immunization records, and transfer documentation from a homeschool program that Santos couldn't verify existed. "The homeschool registration is a dead end," Santos explained. "Oregon has fairly loose homeschool requirements. Anyone can file the paperwork. The program listed on Sarah's transfer documents was supposedly run by a woman named Margaret Thornton, but I can't find any record of her existence." "Fabricated," Marianne said, "almost certainly. I'm also looking into how the Mitchells obtained a birth certificate for Sarah. Oregon's Vital Records database shows a Sarah Marie Mitchell born in April 2003, but the original birth certificate lists different parents. Someone either forged a new certificate or fraudulently obtained an amended one. Can you arrest them for that?" "Once we prove it, yes. But first, we need to establish that Sarah is actually Emma. Everything else flows from that." The breakthrough came on March 28th, 13 days after Marianne had first seen Sarah's face in the news video. Detective Santos called at 7 p.m., her voice carrying an urgency that made Marianne's heart race. "We got him. Robert Mitchell. He has a criminal record." "What kind of record?" "Document fraud, back in 1998 before he moved to Oregon. He was convicted in California for creating false birth certificates and social security cards. Served 18 months. He was working for an underground adoption network, connecting biological parents who wanted to give up children with couples who couldn't adopt through legal channels." Marianne felt her pulse pounding in her ears. "So he's done this before?" "Multiple times, apparently. The California case involved 3 children who were placed with families using false documents. After his release, Mitchell moved to Oregon and supposedly went straight. Clean record for the past 20 years. But this kind of past, combined with Sarah's suspicious documentation, gives us enough for a court order." "A court order for what?" "DNA testing. For Sarah Mitchell. A judge signed off this afternoon. We're executing it tomorrow morning." Marianne's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily on her couch. "Tomorrow? Can I be there?" "No. This has to be handled delicately. We're going to the house at 8 a.m. with the court order. We'll explain the situation to the Mitchells and request Sarah's cooperation. If they refuse, we can compel compliance, but I'm hoping it doesn't come to that." "What if they run?" "We'll have officers monitoring the house tonight. If anyone tries to leave with Sarah, we'll stop them. But I don't think they will. They've been here for nearly a decade. They think they're safe." After Santos hung up, Marianne sat in the darkness of her living room, unable to move. Tomorrow, after 10 years, 3 months, and 19 days, she would finally know the truth. She didn't sleep that night. At 4 a.m., she gave up trying and made coffee, sitting at her kitchen table and watching the clock. At 6 a.m., she showered and dressed carefully, not too casual, not too formal, something that said responsible mother rather than desperate woman. She left her apartment at 7 a.m. and drove to within 2 blocks of Maple Grove Avenue, where she parked and waited. At 8:04 a.m., 2 unmarked police cars pulled up in front of 847 Maple Grove Avenue. Marianne watched through her binoculars as Detective Santos and 3 other officers approached the front door. Catherine Mitchell answered. Even from a distance, Marianne could see the confusion on her face, then the alarm as Santos showed her credentials and the court documents. The door closed. 5 minutes passed, 10, 15, Marianne's phone rang. Santos. They're cooperating, the detective said. Sarah's guardian, Catherine, is very upset, but she's allowing the DNA collection. We're doing it here now. The sample will be fast-tracked to the lab. We should have results by tomorrow afternoon. Is Sarah? How is she? There was a pause. Confused, scared. She doesn't understand what's happening. Ms. Hoffman, I need to prepare you for something. This girl has lived as Sarah Mitchell for her entire remembered life. Even if the DNA confirms she's Emma, the reunion isn't going to be simple. She may not remember you. She may not want to leave the only family she's known. I understand, Marianne whispered, though she didn't. Not really. How could she understand a situation this impossible? We'll call you as soon as we have the results. Try to stay calm. Stay calm. As if that were possible when her entire world was about to either shatter or rebuild itself. Marianne drove home and called in sick to work again. She sat on her couch staring at her phone, willing it to ring. Jennifer came by at lunch with food Marianne didn't eat. Her sister called from Newark and Marianne didn't answer. The hours crawled past with excruciating slowness. At 3:47 p.m. on March 29, 2019, Detective Julia Santos called with the results that would change everything. Ms. Hoffman, she said, her voice gentle but firm. The DNA is a match. Sarah Mitchell is your daughter. She's Emma Hoffman. Marianne heard the words, but they seemed to come from very far away, through water, through time, through 10 years of grief that suddenly didn't know where to go. I found her, she whispered. I found my baby. Yes, Santos said. You did. Now comes the hard part. Portland, Oregon, April 2019. The conference room at Portland Police Department's Central Precinct smelled like burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Marianne sat on one side of a long table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Across from her sat Robert and Catherine Mitchell, a lawyer between them. A severe-looking woman named Patricia Whitmore who'd arrived within an hour of the DNA results being confirmed. Detective Santos stood near the door, arms crossed, watching everyone with the careful attention of someone expecting the situation to explode at any moment. Let me be very clear about where we are legally, Santos said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. The DNA results confirm that the minor you've been raising as Sarah Mitchell is actually Emma Rose Hoffman, who was reported missing in Newark, New Jersey in October 2009. This is now a federal case involving parental kidnapping across state lines, child identity fraud, and conspiracy to conceal a missing child. Catherine Mitchell had been crying since they'd arrived, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with graying blonde hair and eyes that kept darting to her husband like a drowning person looking for a life preserver. Robert Mitchell, by contrast, sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. He was 51 years old, according to the background check, but looked older, weathered, with deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His hands rested flat on the table, and he hadn't said a word since entering the room. My clients are fully prepared to cooperate with this investigation, Patricia Whitmore said crisply. She was maybe 45, dressed in an expensive gray suit that screamed corporate law, not family court. However, I want it stated clearly for the record that Robert and Catherine Mitchell had no knowledge that Sarah was a kidnapped child. They believed they were participating in a private adoption arrangement. Private adoption? Marianne's voice cracked as she spoke for the first time. She'd been told to stay quiet, to let the police handle the questioning, but she couldn't contain herself anymore. You stole my daughter. You've had her for 10 years. You watch the news, you must have seen the missing person reports, the Amber Alerts. Ms. Hoffman, Detective Santos said firmly, please. We didn't steal anyone, Robert Mitchell said quietly, speaking for the first time. His voice was rough like gravel. We were told the mother was deceased, that the father was unable to care for the child and wanted to find her a good home. That's a lie, Marianne said. My daughter was kidnapped by her father. You helped him disappear her. Patricia Whitmore held up a hand. My clients will not respond to accusations. They're here as a courtesy to help resolve this situation. They've already provided documentation to Detective Santos showing the circumstances under which they took custody of Sarah. Santos pulled out a file folder and extracted several documents, spreading them across the table. These are the papers the Mitchells claim they received in June 2010, approximately 8 months after Emma disappeared. A falsified adoption agreement, a forged death certificate listing Marianne Hoffman as deceased, and testimony from someone identifying himself as Derek Hoffman, stating he was seeking a private placement for his daughter. Marianne stared at the death certificate, her own death certificate dated March 2010, listing cause of death as automobile accident. The document looked official, complete with a raised seal and registration number. If she didn't know she was alive, she might have believed it herself. Where did this transaction take place? Santos asked the Mitchells. Catherine's lawyer answered for her. My clients met with an intermediary in Eugene, Oregon in June 2010. The intermediary identified himself as Derek Hoffman's brother-in-law and handled all documentation. My clients paid $30,000 in cash, which they believed was covering legal fees and medical expenses. $30,000, Marianne repeated, her voice hollow. You bought my daughter. We saved a child from foster care, Catherine Mitchell said, her voice breaking. That's what we thought we were doing. The intermediary told us Derek Hoffman was homeless, struggling with addiction, about to lose custody. He said the child needed a stable home immediately or she'd be placed in the state system. We'd been trying to adopt for years. Conventional adoption agencies kept turning us down because of Robert's record. His record of creating false documents for illegal adoptions, Santos interjected. Patricia Whitmore's expression hardened. My client's previous conviction is a matter of public record. He served his time. That conviction is also exactly why someone would have approached him with this arrangement. Mr. Mitchell was targeted specifically because of his past, because the intermediary knew he would be able to facilitate the paperwork. Did you ever question whether this was legal? Santos asked, directing the question to Robert Mitchell. You, of all people who'd been convicted of this exact crime before. Did it ever occur to you that this might be another illegal adoption? Robert Mitchell's jaw tightened. For the first time, Marianne saw emotion flicker across his face. Shame, maybe, or anger. I asked questions. I was told everything was legitimate, that the mother was dead, and the father had legal right to place the child. I verified the documentation as best I could. The death certificate looked real. The adoption papers had notary stamps. I wanted to believe it was legal because we wanted a child so badly. You wanted to believe it, Marianne said, so you didn't look too hard. We loved her, Catherine said suddenly, her voice fierce despite the tears. From the first moment we saw her, we loved Sarah. We gave her everything. A good home, good schools, stability, affection. We've been her parents for 10 years. That has to count for something. You've been her kidnappers for 10 years, Marianne shot back. You don't get credit for feeding and housing a child you helped steal. Ms. Hoffman, Patricia Whitmore said coldly, I understand your anger, but attacking my clients doesn't change the situation. The question now is what happens next, and how we protect Sarah's well-being through this transition. Transition? Marianne's voice rose. There's no transition. She's my daughter. She comes home with me. Today. Detective Santos stepped forward, her expression sympathetic but firm. Ms. Hoffman, it's not that simple. This situation falls under Oregon's family court jurisdiction. Even with the DNA confirmation, there are legal processes that have to be followed before custody can be transferred. Legal processes? I am her mother, her legal biological mother. She was stolen from me. And she's also a minor who's been living with the same family for nearly 10 years, Santos said. The courts have to consider her best interests. That includes a psychological evaluation, a custody hearing, and most likely a transition period. A transition period, Marianne repeated, the words tasting bitter. So what? I get scheduled visitation with my own kidnapped daughter, while her kidnappers get to keep playing house? The Mitchells will be charged, Santos assured her. Robert Mitchell is already facing multiple felony counts: conspiracy to commit child abduction, identity fraud, falsification of government documents. Catherine will likely face accessory charges. But that's separate from the custody question. Right now, the priority is Emma's psychological well-being. Her name is Emma, Marianne said firmly, looking directly at Catherine Mitchell. Not Sarah, Emma, and she's going to remember that. Catherine flinched as if struck. She doesn't remember. We've asked her. After the DNA test, we sat her down and asked if she remembered anything before age 6. Before us. She doesn't. She doesn't remember you. The words hit Marianne like a physical blow. She'd known this was possible, likely even, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that hollowed out her chest. Then I'll help her remember, Marianne said quietly. I'm her mother. That doesn't change just because you tried to erase me. The meeting continued for another hour, laying out the legal framework that would govern the next several months. The Mitchells would remain in their home, but under electronic monitoring to ensure they didn't flee with Emma. Marianne would be granted supervised visitation, starting immediately, with the goal of eventually transitioning to unsupervised and then full custody. A child psychologist specializing in trauma and family reunification would work with Emma throughout the process. I want to see her, Marianne said as the meeting was wrapping up. Today. Now. Santos shook her head. Not today. Emma's been through a massive shock. She needs time to process what she's learned before she meets you. How much time? The psychologist wants to meet with her first, do an initial assessment. Then we'll schedule a supervised visit. Probably next week. Next week? Marianne's voice cracked. I've waited 10 years. I found her. The DNA proves she's mine and I have to wait another week? Yes, Santos said simply. Because this isn't about what you need, Ms. Hoffman. It's about what Emma needs. And right now she needs time to understand what's happening to her life. Marianne left the police station feeling hollowed out and furious. She'd found her daughter. The DNA had confirmed it. But Emma was still living with the Mitchells, still sleeping in the room they'd created for her, still being called Sarah, still living a lie. Jennifer met her in the parking lot, having waited through the entire 3-hour meeting. How did it go? They're treating them like victims, Marianne said, her voice shaking. The Mitchells, like they just made an innocent mistake. Catherine was crying about how much she loves Sarah, and the lawyer was spinning it like they were doing a good deed, rescuing a child from foster care. What did the police say? That I have to wait. Again. Always waiting. There's going to be a custody evaluation, psychological assessments, supervised visitation. They're making me prove I deserve my own daughter back. Jennifer pulled Marianne into a hug as she finally broke down. 10 years of grief and rage and desperate hope collapsing into sobs in a police station parking lot. The first visit was scheduled for April 8th, 10 days after the DNA confirmation. Marianne barely slept the night before. She'd agonized over what to wear, something maternal but not desperate, approachable but not casual. She'd rehearsed what she would say, how she would introduce herself, what she would do if Emma didn't want to talk to her. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. at a family services building downtown, in a room designed to look comfortable and non-threatening. Colorful furniture, toys in one corner, windows letting in natural light. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the psychologist assigned to the case, met Marianne in the lobby 15 minutes early. I want to prepare you, Dr. Chen said gently. She was in her mid-40s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that probably worked well with traumatized children. Emma, she's still going by Sarah, by the way, is very confused and frightened. She doesn't remember you. The Mitchells are the only parents she's known. This is going to be difficult for both of you. I understand, Marianne said, though her heart was hammering so hard she felt dizzy. I'll be in the room with you. The visit will last 1 hour. Let Emma set the pace. Don't push too hard. Don't expect too much. Your goal today is just to meet her, to let her see you're a real person, not a threat. At precisely 2 p.m., the door opened and Emma walked in. She was taller than Marianne had imagined, nearly 5'6", with her brown hair pulled back in a braid. She wore jeans and a plain blue sweatshirt, and her expression was guarded. Arms crossed, shoulders tense, eyes that looked everywhere except at Marianne. "Sarah," Dr. Chen said gently, "this is Marianne Hoffman. Well, you know who she is." Emma's eyes finally met Marianne's, and the impact of seeing those eyes, Emma's eyes, looking at her with no recognition, no warmth, just wariness, nearly broke Marianne's composure. "Hi," Marianne managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Emma didn't respond, just stood there looking trapped. Dr. Chen gestured to the chairs. "Why don't we all sit down?" The hour that followed was the longest and most painful of Marianne's life. She tried to make small talk, asking Emma about school, her interests, her friends. Emma answered in monosyllables, her body language screaming discomfort. When Marianne showed her old photos, Emma as a baby, as a toddler, the two of them together, Emma looked at them like they were pictures of strangers. "I don't remember any of this," Emma said finally, pushing the photos back across the table. "I'm sorry, but I don't. The Mitchells are my parents. I don't know you." "I know you don't remember," Marianne said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You were so young when we were separated. But Emma, my name is Sarah." "Your name is Emma Rose Hoffman. That's the name I gave you when you were born. That's who you are." "No," Emma said, her voice rising. "That's who you want me to be. But I'm Sarah Mitchell. That's the only name I've ever known. You can't just decide I'm someone else because some DNA test says so." Dr. Chen intervened before Marianne could respond. "Sarah, no one's trying to force you to be someone you're not. We're just trying to help you understand your history, where you came from. Marianne is your biological mother. That's a fact. What we do with that fact is something we'll work through together." Emma stood up abruptly. "I want to go home, to my real home, with my real parents." "The Mitchells aren't," Marianne started. "They raised me," Emma's voice cracked. "They were there for every birthday, every first day of school, every time I was sick or scared or needed someone." "Where were you?" The question hung in the air like a knife. "I was looking for you," Marianne whispered. "Every single day for 10 years I was looking for you." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her expression remained hard. "Well, you found me. Congratulations. Now what? You think I'm just going to forget the only family I've ever known and play happy reunion with a stranger? I'm not a stranger. I'm your mother." "You're a DNA donor," Emma shot back. "That's it. The Mitchells are my parents. They love me. They didn't abandon me. I didn't abandon you. You were taken from me." Dr. Chen stood, her voice firm but gentle. "I think that's enough for today. Sarah, you did well coming here and expressing your feelings. Marianne, you too. This is a process. It takes time." Emma left without looking back. Marianne sat in the chair, shaking as Dr. Chen closed the door and returned to sit beside her. "That was about as difficult as first meetings get," the psychologist said. "But it's not unusual. Emma's entire identity has been called into question. She's defending the only life she knows." "She hates me," Marianne said numbly. "She's scared and angry and confused. Those feelings aren't about you personally, they're about the situation. With time and patience, she'll begin to process everything. But you need to be prepared for this to be a long journey." Over the following weeks, Marianne had supervised visits with Emma twice a week. Each one was slightly less hostile than the last, but progress was measured in inches. Emma gradually stopped referring to the Mitchells as her real parents, though she refused to call Marianne Mom. They found neutral ground talking about school, about Emma's interest in track and field, about a book series they'd both read. But the distance remained. Emma treated these visits like a chore, something she had to endure rather than something she wanted. The custody hearing was scheduled for late May, 6 weeks after the DNA confirmation. The judge would determine Emma's placement, whether she would return to Marianne's custody, remain with the Mitchells pending their trial, or enter some transitional arrangement. Robert Mitchell had been indicted on 5 felony counts. Catherine faced 3 counts as an accessory. Their lawyer was arguing for leniency based on their belief that the adoption was legitimate. But the prosecution had uncovered evidence that Robert had known the documentation was fraudulent. Emails and financial records suggesting he'd paid additional money to the mysterious intermediary to expedite the false paperwork. The intermediary was never identified. Derek Hoffman remained a ghost, having vanished after handing Emma over to the Mitchells in June 2010. Interpol had a warrant out for his arrest, but there was no trail to follow. And Emma, caught in the middle of legal battles and psychological evaluations, and 2 families claiming her, grew more withdrawn with each passing week. "She's depressed," Dr. Chen told Marianne during a check-in meeting in early May. "The situation is taking a toll on her mental health. She's struggling in school, pulling away from friends. She feels like her entire life was a lie, and she doesn't know who to trust anymore." "What do I do?" Marianne asked desperately. "How do I help her?" "Keep showing up, keep being patient, and prepare yourself for the possibility that Emma might choose to stay with the Mitchells, even after the custody decision. She's 16. Does she get a choice?" At her age, the court will consider her preference, yes, not as the deciding factor, but as a significant one. If Emma testifies that she wants to remain with the Mitchells, and if the judge believes that's in her best interest despite their crimes, that could influence the outcome. The hearing was set for May 28th. As the date approached, Marianne felt her carefully constructed hope beginning to fracture. She'd found her daughter. The DNA proved it. But after 10 years of absence, after a decade of being Sarah Mitchell instead of Emma Hoffman, was biology enough to bridge that canyon? Or had she found Emma only to discover that the daughter she'd lost no longer existed? Portland, Oregon. May 2019. The courtroom was smaller than Marianne had imagined, with fluorescent lights that gave everyone's skin a sickly pallor. She sat behind the prosecutor's table, Jennifer beside her for moral support, while across the aisle, Robert and Catherine Mitchell sat with their lawyer. Emma, Sarah, wasn't present yet. Dr. Chen had explained she would testify separately, in the judge's chambers, to reduce the trauma of public testimony. Judge Margaret Whitfield entered at 9 a.m. sharp, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd reviewed all the documentation, the psychological evaluations, the DNA evidence, the criminal charges against the Mitchells. "This is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial," Judge Whitfield began. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell will face criminal charges separately. Today, we're determining what's in the best interest of the minor child legally known as Emma Rose Hoffman, who has been living as Sarah Marie Mitchell for nearly 10 years. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda Torres, presented Marianne's case first, the kidnapping in 2009, the decade of searching, the DNA match, Marianne's stable employment, her apartment, her readiness to welcome Emma home. Ms. Hoffman has been denied her parental rights for 10 years through criminal actions, Torres argued. The court must restore custody to the biological mother and allow this family to heal. Patricia Whitmore stood to present the Mitchell's position. "Your Honor, my clients made a terrible mistake trusting the wrong people in 2010, but for nearly a decade, they've been exemplary parents. Sarah Mitchell, and yes, that's the only name this child knows, has thrived in their care. Ripping her away from the only family she remembers would be psychological torture. The Mitchells are facing felony charges," Torres countered, "which they will answer to. But punishing them shouldn't mean punishing Sarah by forcing her into a stranger's home." At 10:30 a.m., Judge Whitfield called for a recess and requested Emma be brought to chambers. Marianne waited in agony for 90 minutes before the judge returned, her expression unreadable. "I've spoken with Sarah at length," Judge Whitfield said. "I've reviewed Dr. Chen's psychological evaluation and considered all testimony. This is an extraordinary situation with no perfect solution." Marianne's hands clenched in her lap. Sarah has expressed a strong preference to remain with the Mitchells. She views them as her parents and their home as her home. She does not remember Marianne Hoffman, and despite weeks of supervised visits, has not formed a meaningful bond. Marianne felt the floor drop away beneath her. However, the judge continued, the legal reality is that Sarah is Emma Hoffman, kidnapped as a child. The Mitchells facilitated that crime, whether knowingly or through willful blindness. I cannot allow criminals to benefit from their actions by retaining custody of their victim. Catherine Mitchell made us sound like a wounded animal. Therefore, my ruling is as follows. Legal custody of Emma Hoffman will be transferred to her biological mother, Marianne Hoffman, effective June 15, 2019. However, given the child's age and psychological state, this will not be a forced removal. Emma will be given the choice of where she physically resides while remaining under her mother's legal guardianship until she turns 18. Marianne's lawyer leaned over. That's as good as we could hope for, she whispered. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. Not when Emma chose to stay with the Mitchells. Not when the weekly visits continued, formal and strained. With Emma treating Marianne like a court-ordered obligation. Not when Robert Mitchell was sentenced to 4 years in prison and Catherine received probation, but Emma still called them mom and dad. The case was officially closed in August 2019. Emma Hoffman was found. The mystery solved. Detective Reeves called to congratulate Marianne on never giving up. But as Marianne sat in her apartment on what should have been a triumphant evening, looking at photos of a 6-year-old girl she'd lost and a 16-year-old stranger she'd found, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd won the battle but lost something far more important. Her daughter was alive, but she was still, in every way that mattered, missing. Portland, Oregon, November 2020. Marianne's phone buzzed at 7:43 p.m. on a rainy Thursday evening. She almost didn't answer. Another unknown number, probably spam. But something made her pick up. Marianne? The voice was hesitant, young. It's Emma. Marianne's hand tightened around the phone. Emma never called. Their supervised visits had gradually transitioned to optional meetings, which Emma attended sporadically, usually with visible reluctance. The last time they'd spoken was 6 weeks ago, an awkward coffee shop encounter where Emma had spent most of the hour on her phone. Emma, is everything okay? A pause. Then quietly, can I come over? To your place? I need to talk to someone. 40 minutes later, Emma stood in Marianne's doorway, soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her face. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than the defensive teenager from the custody hearings. She was 17 now, a senior at Lincoln High School, still living with Catherine Mitchell while Robert served his prison sentence. Come in, Marianne said, grabbing a towel. Let me make you some tea. They sat in the living room, the silence stretching between them like all the other silences over the past 18 months. Emma wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into the tea. I've been having dreams, she said finally. Memories, maybe. I don't know. There's this stuffed rabbit, purple ears. I keep seeing it. Marianne's breath caught. Mr. Hoppy. Emma's eyes snapped up. What? That was your rabbit's name. You slept with him every night. You forgot him the morning your father picked you up. You cried in the car. Emma's hands trembled. I remember crying. I remember wanting something, missing something. But I thought it was just a dream. It wasn't a dream, sweetheart. It was real. You were real. We were real. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. Why is this happening now? Why am I remembering after all this time? Because you're ready, Marianne said softly. Dr. Chen said this might happen, that as you got older, processed the trauma, the memories might start coming back. I've been so angry at you, Emma whispered, for disrupting my life, for making everything complicated, but Catherine, she's been different since Robert went to prison. Distant. Like she's going through the motions, and I keep wondering, would she have kept lying to me forever if you hadn't found me? Did she ever really love me, or was I just a project? I think she did love you, Marianne said carefully, in her own way. But that doesn't make what they did right. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Tell me about her. About the mother I don't remember. So Marianne did. She talked about Emma's birth, how she'd had a full head of dark hair even as a newborn. About her first words, her first steps. The way she'd laughed at Bubbles and been terrified of the vacuum cleaner. How she'd insisted on wearing her fairy wings to the grocery store for an entire month when she was 4. Emma listened, tears streaming silently down her face, and for the first time since the DNA test, Marianne saw recognition in her daughter's eyes. Not memory exactly, but something deeper. An acknowledgement of connection, of shared history, of a bond that 10 years couldn't completely erase. I don't know how to be Emma, she said finally. I've been Sarah for so long. You don't have to choose, Marianne said. You're both. Sarah is who you became. Emma is who you were. Maybe you can be both, or maybe you can be someone new, whoever you want to be. Emma set down her tea, and for the first time since that awful day in the family services building, she moved closer to Marianne. Hesitantly, like approaching something fragile, she leaned her head against Marianne's shoulder. Marianne wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her while she cried. For the childhood stolen, for the mother forgotten, for the impossible situation they'd both been forced into. I'm scared, Emma whispered. Me too, Marianne admitted. But we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. It wasn't the reunion Marianne had dreamed of for 10 years. There was no instant bond, no magical healing, no erasing of the decade they'd lost. The road ahead would be long and complicated. Therapy, rebuilding trust, navigating Emma's conflicted feelings about the Mitchells and her stolen identity. But as they sat together on the couch, rain pattering against the windows, Marianne felt something she hadn't felt since October 2009. Hope. Her daughter was found. Not just physically located, not just DNA confirmed, but truly found. Beginning to remember, beginning to heal, beginning to come home. The case might be officially closed, archived in Newark's files as another parental kidnapping resolved. But for Marianne and Emma, this was just the beginning. The real work of rebuilding a family, of learning to trust again, of bridging 10 years of absence was only starting. Can I come back? Emma asked as she was leaving, standing in the doorway with the rain still falling behind her. Next week? Just to talk? You can come back anytime, Marianne said. My door is always open. It always has been. Emma nodded, something like a smile crossing her face. Then she stepped out into the rain, and Marianne watched her go, not with the desperate fear of 10 years ago, but with the quiet confidence that this time her daughter would return. The case was closed, but the story was far from over.